Good morning. It is 10:30. It is the 6th day of December of Jingle Jam of Vlogmas, and today we are beginning our deep dive into possibly, in my opinion, the second best 5th edition adventure path based on previous product there is. I mean, we know I love Tomb of Annihilation. I think Tomb of Annihilation is the greatest, most D&D adventure that 5th edition has put out, even though, a lot of people find it very deadly when you get to the actual tomb. But everything leading up to the actual tomb is just so pure D&D. But if we're talking about let's take a previous old school adventure against the Giants and update it to 5th, Ravenloft probably is the best. But this is the second best. And it has one of my favorite, it's updated one of my favorite all-time adventures, which is G1, G2, G3, Hill Giant. And I just always like that one. I mean, it's just such a clear, concise, linear story. It introduces us to Dro. It seems like it's one thing and it turns out to be another thing. It required early players to become very tactical and think, more like, well, I'm a military situation. I'm going against overwhelming odds. And this Storm King's Thunder is considered very well. I mean, it's considered the second best by a lot. So it's basically, once again, telling the story of giants that have united to wage war on humanity. And it starts out seeming like, oh, well, they're not connected. This is just a random series of raids. The Hill Giants are getting all uppity. The Frost Giants are starting to get, come down from the mountains to attack the coastal towns. The Fire Giants are gathering more slaves, but they're not connected. They're all not in the same place. And these guys are over here, these guys are over here, these guys are over here. And this is just shit that happens all the time in the Forgotten Realms, or wherever you set this. But this is set specifically in the Forgotten Realms, which is one of the only negative thing about this is like most of them, Forgotten Realm centric. So if you're running it like me, not in the Forgotten Realms, then you have to cut and paste stuff out and cut and paste stuff in to make it fit your game setting. But if you take out that and just tell the story of, well, seemingly not connected groups of giants attacking and doing giant evil stuff, but then slowly you discover there is a connected and there is almost like a Empire Strikes Back malevolent force at the very end of this, manipulating all these forces together for one common goal of just, Uberus giant overall, uniting the giant empire, which of course I don't know if that would, and just, getting the giants back to their status of once they once were. Because from a mythological point of view, you got to remember, like, when we go down the pecking order, it's gods, titans, giants, and many of the mythologies either helped build the world, built the world and lost it to the gods, or helped build the world and then lost it to the gods, or were very divine beings in a lot of different mythologies, especially Greek and Norse and stuff like that. And then for whatever reason, they are either betrayed by the gods and mankind, or they turn on mankind and the gods have to punish them. But it always leads back to sort of that one thing that, giants used to be way high in the celestial pecking order. And a lot of giants haven't forgotten that, and haven't forgotten that we used to be way more up there instead of just, oh, well, I beat up all the orcs and I beat up all the ogres. What is the hill giant? Just a bigger ogre, So that having that idea that these not connected stories are slowly working their way together, and somewhere in the back of all this is this Machiavellian malevolent force that is uniting the giants because it remembers where they used to be, and it wants that revenge. It wants to reclaim the world for these semi-divine godchildren that giants once were and could be again. And that's why it's so fun. Plus, it just pits, us normal, puny, first-level adventurers against giants. It's like, and then you just have to think completely different out of the box. It's like running a campaign in the air, which you can do later on when we get to like the Storm Giants, running the campaign underwater. Where now you have to start thinking 3-dimensional and 4-dimensional. You can't just think what's directly in front of me, what's to the left, what's to the right, because you're dealing with something even initially when you're fighting the hill giants that is one size bigger than you. And that one size bigger makes such a difference when you break it down to just pure D&D combat. You can't just go one-on-one, 1v1, low-level thug player character versus a hill giant, because for one thing, the hill giant has the reach, and the hill giant has the range with the stones, and even with, and all the things. And then that fight makes everything different. You have to think differently when you're fighting these guys, and that requires a lot more tactical, a lot more in-depth, a lot more planning. Plus, there's lots of role-playing elements in this game because you get to explore the world, you get to deal with giant politics, you get to deal with how NPCs are reacting or not reacting. You get to try and convince people that this is going on, and then you get to the big bad at the end, and you're fighting in like a flying, sky castle, and there's storm giants and dragons, and and the great thing about this is it has been redone so many times. You can mishmash, like I do, it together because you've got the original Against the Giants series and all the variations of G1, G2, G3, and each one is slightly different. And then you have the homages to Against the Giants that have been done. There's a lot of other non-Wizards of the Coast adventures out there, especially from 3rd edition and the OGL, that are very reminiscent of this, And even then they might have different names like Tomb of the Giant Ghost or Revenge of the Storm Giants. They're obviously influenced by G1, G2, or 3. Then we have Howl from the North, or Howl from Beyond, I forget what it's called, which was basically retelling G1, G2, G3, but changing who the main bad guys were from giants to even more obscure, dealing with like gnolls and dragonborn and abominations, and like what are some of the other really obscure evil races that haven't really gotten a chance to really shine. And that's what Howl from the North gave you. It retold this story, but changed it from giants to other things. And then, of course, we have Pathfinder's Giant Slayer, which is an adventure path that they did, and came out before this, which is also an homage to Against the Giants. And it basically retells Against the Giants in the Pathfinder world, as well as adding new concepts of how would a world deal with these kind of threats. These threats have happened in the past, and they'll happen again in the future. And then you get to the big bad at the end, and you've got the Storm Giant who's got one of the orbs of dragonkind, and he's commanding dragons and trying to unite all the dragons and the giants together, and it's just an amazing story. And then you have this, which again retells the G1 through G3 story, but I don't think it, without maybe the Drow Elf influence, and more just focusing on that idea of uniting these giants together under one and getting them to work together, since some of them are chaotic and some of them are lawful. And then how do you convince the cloud giants, who are always sort of, well, are they good or are they bad? Well, either way, they've always been separate from the rest of the giants and the storm giants, and then convince them to follow this enigmatic, charismatic leader to unite the giants. So it's a great adventure path, and I've run variations of Giant Slayer and Storm King Thunder several times, and I hope to do it again. Sometimes, and I've also done the same story but changed the bad guys. When I ran Howl from the North, I think it was called Howl from the North. Yeah, I changed the bad guys and I mashed together other things that fit the same theme, which is again what's great about this, because you can mash it together with Giant Pathfinder's Giant Slayer. You can mash it together with Against the Giants. You can mash it together with other modules that deal with the same basic theme. So even if your player characters have gone through this, you can surprise them up, because there's just so many things that have been done that are dedicated in homages to this. And then you get to the final, and plus, if you live long enough, you get to the final battle where you get to have a giant fight on flying castle. And how is that not cool? And then you have to, of course, think about, well, how am I going to get up to a flying castle? I guess I got to add things, which gets back to the whole, this module and these adventures force players to think more creatively, more tactically, try and resolve problems maybe more diplomatically. You can't just go one-on-one, toe-to-toe with these guys because they're bigger than you. Even the very first group of bad guys, Hills Giants, are one size bigger than your player characters, which gives them a unique advantage in combat because they have range and they have reach. So they can, from a pure combat point of view, I can strike you before you ever get near to me because I got reach. So I got one extra hex, and that's just the Hill Giant. And you get up to the bigger guys when they've got, 2 hexes of reach, 3 hexes of reach, 4 hexes of reach. When they're Godzillaing through town, and you're like, okay, how am I going to fight a guy that can knock down buildings and wrestle a dragon? And I'm 5 foot nothing with my 15 strength doing 3d6. I love this. I look forward going through it with you guys and really taking it apart and showing you how I mash it together with another module series and how I use it to tell this amazing sweeping story. And then, of course, the Star Wars homage, because you just just use the giants as the Empire and the big bad at the end is the Emperor, and you just can it's so ripe, which is why I think it's the second best homage module. Obviously, I think most everybody agrees the Ravenloft homage modules that they've done for 5th are probably the best, but this is definitely the second best, and in my heart, my favorite. So I look forward to going through this with you. If this is something you're interested in seeing, please comment down below. If you aren't interested in it and think I should shut the fuck up, comment down below. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, please consider subscribing. Help me hit 250 subs by the end of the year. I do have things to give away should I hit 250 subs. I have some Xbox codes. I have some DLC codes. So I'm looking forward to hopefully convincing you guys to follow me into 2021, being part of what I have planned for the next year, assuming we're all still here. I will talk to you, bah humbug losers, later.